All right. All right. What's going on, folks? It is yet another week, another episode of the Truth Be Told show. And I've got with me a couple brothers from other mothers, brother Peter Hayes, Better Days with Peter Hayes, as well as brother Marcus Ray. And I know if he's traveling from out of town there into town, then he's going to be popping in and out because that's how those towers go. But I can't hear you there if you are. Oh, you're on mute there, brother Marcus.
Yes, sir. I'm on mute to keep down the road noise, but I am here.
All right, all right. Well, good. Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
Let's rock and
All
roll.
right. Well, let's go ahead and get the show going, folks. We'll talk about some things as soon as we pop up here. All right, folks. It's Truth Be Told show.
All right, cue the music.
Cue music.
Start the music.
Starting music.
And go.
It's the Truth Be Told show, where we place America first. Honoring those who America has forgotten. Listen in and unlearn to relearn. As we set the record straight. And now, your host of the Truth Be Told show, Mr. Just Ask Joe and Uncle Mishorn.
All right, folks. It is the Truth Be Told show. Another episode, another week. It is Tuesday, June 7th. June 7th, 2022, folks. This is the only Tuesday, June 7th, 2022 that you will ever get. So remember, make it a great day. And I tell you what, folks, we've got a lot to talk about here. We've got our theme here, strong men, fathers, and families. Again, that's strong men, fathers, and families. And it's kind of a continuation from last week, but it's just amazing. And I can't not talk about the elephant in the room, or the elephant that's not in the room. The big guy, conservative Uncle Mishorn, is not with us right now. He has some things he's got to take care of, and he probably won't be with us for a little while. And that's fine, folks. We're going to rock the show just the same and hopefully make them proud, right? So, Better Days with Peter Days. How you doing there, brother?
I am blessed down in Tampa, Florida. Plenty of sunshine. So I'm excited. I've been down here a couple weeks and enjoying it down here in the Sunshine State.
You ever coming back, man?
I don't know. I was telling my wife, I mean,
every time I go, my family's down there, and every time I go, I think twice about coming back. Last year I went in November, and I didn't come back until March the next year. So I was only supposed to be there a week.
Yeah, exactly. I have that same feeling. It's like with me and my business, I have my laptop and my phone. I can do business anywhere in the world. So
that's what I'm talking about. It's the same with me, man. Marcus Ray, how you doing there, brother?
Pretty good. How's it going back there in Louisville? I'm been traveling this past week myself. Headed back to the Bluegrass and heading back out to Florida in the morning to go pick up my daughter. So I won't be here long. But
awesome.
Lauderdale. We're glad to be here today.
You'll be just a couple hours away from brother Peter Hayes there. Are you driving?
No, I'm gonna catch a flight out of Louisville this evening and fly into into Fort Lauderdale and pick her up and then head on back.
Gotcha. Is that college student?
No, that's my oldest daughter. She moved to Florida thinking there was something better in Florida. You know how they are. It's always something better than where you live. She got down there and found out that it's just like everywhere else. And so now she's homesick, and so daddy's going to get her.
Oh, man, I tell you what, I love being a tour guide in Florida. Anytime people go, I say, look, you can't go to my city, my state without me going, because South Florida is is my love, man. And I got places I go to where I know where I can go down in South Florida where a guy has a pickup truck, and in the bed of the pickup truck, he's got coconuts and a cooler with ice, and he's got a press that he's pressing sugarcane juice out of, and knock the head off or the top off of a coconut and throw a straw in it. I got places like that I go to. I love walking in Hialeah as well. There's all type of coffee shops and bodegas to go to, and I like visiting places, seeing their culture and seeing how they do things, and I absolutely love it. I remember one year I got dropped off from the airport by Uber to go to the family house, and I had the guy drop me off at the grocery store up the street, and then I was able to walk home. When I walked home, man, I probably found 5 different pieces of fruit just on the ground from trees hanging over people's fences. And I said, you know what? That's why all the homeless people here are happy. You go down to the amphitheater, you got homeless people with $1 beer and a avocado in the other hand, and they're dancing and having fun, man. It's hard to be mad in Florida because of that vitamin D you get all the time and being down by one of God's greatest creations, the ocean, man. But I tell you what, that's enough talk about Florida, man. We got a couple things we want to talk about here. And let's see here. We're talking about some current events, folks. I guess the biggest question, and this is on our mind and everybody else's mind, what is up with all of these shootings? What is going on in America? I'm sorry to say, but I feel like something is being done on purpose. What you guys think there? Brother Marcus, what you think?
Well, I think you could lean towards something being done on purpose as you look at the internet and all these social media groups and how things are happening out on the radical fringe of things, and how a person is converted to radicalism. And so I believe that it is some grand scheme as part of what's happening. Just if you look at the availability and the possibility of those types of things coming with these fringe operations.
Absolutely. What you think, Better Days?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like what's in the drinking water. It seems like these happen kind of all the time, shootings and murders, but these public shootings and going into public places is definitely a different animal than what we see regularly. And I don't know. I think as a copycats, people wanting that fame and notoriety. I think what Marcus said too, the younger generation is so big in social media, getting attention and being liked and followed. And, it seems like, since we're talking about fatherhood, one thing I notice about a lot of these mass shootings are there's not very often there's not a father in the home. It's not 100%, but that seems to be a common denominator for some of these just random shootings, that there's not a father in a home, and that's quite
or maybe even not even a good father sometimes. I mean, I think that what we should do. This is just me. I think that what we should do is we should, when the guys are caught and it's proven. I mean, you got video footage of the guy holding the gun, shooting up, blah blah. Outside of people saying, hey, I don't remember any of this, and it being proven that this guy just doesn't remember, because that's what happened in the Aurora shooting, that movie theater Batman shooting years ago. The guy said, look, I don't remember any of this, and they figured he like blacked out or something. I believe in neuro-linguistic programming though, and I know that you can create a situation to where a person through hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, can go and do something, and be made to do something, and not be and they don't realize it. They don't realize they're part of a ploy or what have you, some other nefarious group or person utilizing them, right? And so you can look that up. There's all type of things online about neuro-linguistic programming and how that works, hypnosis and all of that included. But with that in mind, I think that the penalty should be, since it's a mass shooting, I think like all the families of the people, right, who were victims, and any victims themselves that are up to the task should all be given a gun, and you stand the guy the up like and it's still a mass shooting because you have a mass of people shooting at this one person, and that should be the penalty for this stuff. I had a friend who grew up in Haiti in, I think it was the 80s. Peter, you probably know who the I forget his name. I think it starts with a or something. I'm not sure, but whoever the dictator was in Haiti during the 80s. He fled Haiti.
Duvalier or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but either way, my buddy said, "Look, Joe, we could leave our door unlocked at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you wouldn't have anybody doing any crime, busting anything open. It was no big deal. Why? Because the penalty for everything was damn near for everything was death, right? So if you stole something, you got your hand chopped off, and the penalty for death was out there. So there was a harsh penalty for the crime, right? So with that in mind, having a harsher penalty for the crime made people not want to do the crime. You guys think we're too soft in America? What you think, Peter?
So. I think so for sure. I mean, most of the time these, people don't get, a lot of times they don't get caught and they go through the judicial system, they get slaps on the hand. You hear so many cases of people, being arrested and convicted 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They're basically just career criminals. Actually, mostly it's a small percentage of the people that actually commit many, many crimes. They're kind of psychopathic. And that's something interesting. Should we increase the penalties? I'm kind of soft on smaller crimes, but violent crimes,
violent crimes like this, definitely we got to increase the penalties, man. Like people definitely, and it needs to be something where an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing is my thing. Marcus, what you think, man?
Well, I think the problem with not necessarily increasing the penalties, but when it's disproportionately applied to people who look like me, then I have to give it a moment of pause. I'm all for harsher penalties, but you got to be fair about how they're done. So
across the board.
Well, I agree. I agree it should be across the board, but the penalties the way they are now are across the board, but they still get disproportionately applied to people who look like me. Mm-hmm. And so making a harsher sentence and have it continually disproportionately applied doesn't do any good either.
Of course. So absolutely, I think the same, and I absolutely agree. But Papa Doc, that's who it was, Francois Papa Doc. And with all these dictators, there's people, even in Cuba, with your boy, I've heard a lot of good things from Cubans, living in Miami myself, who they loved. Castro. Yeah, they love Fidel. And, but there's those that didn't, but those, I think, more poverty stricken people loved Fidel versus, because he made sure that everybody had what they needed, right? Even some healthcare as well. But those that maybe wanted to strive for more, they come to America and because one thing that Fidel did was try to keep greed out. So like they didn't even have like stuff like certain cartoons and stuff like that, Bugs Bunny or what have you, because of it. But nonetheless, folks, we're going to go to commercial and come right back here, folks. It is once again the Truth Be Told show. We'll see you guys in a second, right back here, same place.
Thank you, Truth Be Told, for allowing God's Lives Matter to be a sponsor. Wearable products, as the purple t-shirt, is bearing witness every life created by God has infinite value. Visit God'sLivesMatter.com.
Habibi Trading Company, home of soap, sticks, and Saya Baba products. Over 400 locations at a store near you. Cincinnati, Ohio, Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, Southern Indiana, or find yours online at sayababa.com. Again, that's sayababa.com. Habibi Trading Company, where you can find fragrances to incite your senses. All right, folks, we are back right here. Again, it is the Truth Be Told show, and we're back and wanted to we're talking about, these mass shootings and stuff like that. Again, strong fathers, families, strong men. When we look at this and we talk about what's going on here, um, like you said, Peter, potentially in a lot of cases there's no father in the home, or maybe even not a strong father in the home. Okay, so that seems to be one thing. So it seems to be just like the motive might have been to take the father out of the home of the melanated community, right? That might have been America's motive at one point, in order to emasculate the melanated man, which has been something that's been going on since slavery days. You take the head of a tribe, you emasculate them, and put them back out there. They do stuff like make them walk around with pants with no belt or rope to hold them up, so their pants is sagging below their butt, right? Embarrassing, right? So, but just as that has been a motive, it has also bled into the rest of society. So they say that AIDS, right, was created for a particular motive. It's conspiracy theory or what have you, right? And it was to get rid of a certain sect of people. But then it spread into general society, right? So here we have it. The idea of getting rid of strong men in a community has spread into general society, right? So what are we to do as we look at the ideal of, creating stronger men, stronger fathers and families in society? I mean, what do you guys think would be some good points, for instance, where we could start? Maybe if we did like a maybe, excuse me, 1 through 6, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I mean, we're already over 40% of children out of wedlock being born. Then what would you think would be a great point to start with as we create a 1 through 6 in getting stronger men? Let's start there.
Well, I think your first object is what's become a societal norm. And so as those things become societal norms, then it creeps to the left or the right each time. And so the first thing I have to do is what is normal for society. And as we move from there, I think in our particular instance, we have to talk about the pride of being a descendant of American slave and what that means as far as building self-worth in something. I've said it often that we spend a lot of time in talking with our friends, our European friends, that they know they come from Ireland or England or wherever. And so I think we have to build and dig some roots right here in America for our descendants or our people to have that same type of pride in the community. That's where I think it starts, is pride in the community.
So, all right. So build pride in the community. That sounds like a number one. Would you say that? Would you agree with that, Peter?
Well, if we're talking about rebuilding fatherhood and the family,
Mm-hmm.
I do agree it's a cultural norm. It's kind of totally acceptable now to have children out of wedlock and not live by, you know, the Judeo-Christian value system that, permeated America, as far as, well, I
I
would
mean,
say,
should we even be holding anything up to any particular religious standard at this point? I mean, we've got a billion different religions here in America, and religion has caused war, famine, and everything else, right? Should there just be a right or wrong, and we
I
just
think so.
focus?
And I was going to say there's universal shared values. Pretty much every society in the world looks, at the family as a father and mother as a stabilizing in society. That's pretty universal. You can't, and it's for good sake. You can't have, it takes a sperm and an egg, a male and a female to have children. So it's just common sense that the whatever is produced through that relationship is the responsibility of those two individuals, when that not necessarily self-evident truth these days in America. And I think that's the problem. I mean, imagine if we taught abstinence until marriage, and that, you should wait until you're married to have sexual activity. People are like, whoa, people, that's shocking. Well, that used to be what we taught in America and throughout the world. We didn't always practice it, but we taught abstinence, and we did that with our children, and they're both practiced that abstinent until marriage and infidelity within marriage. So that's that seems to be old fashioned. But if we got back to teaching that and emphasizing that, not just in schools but in our culture, I think that would have an impact, because how did we get off track, to the fact that now that we have, as you mentioned, 41% of children born out of wedlock in America? How did we get there? So we almost have to backtrack and see what worked in the past. Teaching morals and values works, but also upholding that as a community. If a young girl, got pregnant, that was not seen as a great thing. Out of wedlock, that was seen as a shame
I
to the
think she
family.
was stoned or something, right?
No,
At
I
one
mean,
point in society, she was
Well,
stoned.
I'm talking about in America. You may be too young, but Marcus and I remember when our parents' generation, that was frowned upon and big time, and that was, that was not something that was. It was shameful, and so we took away the
Yeah.
shame, and now it's totally. Churches are having baby showers for moms who aren't married, and it's
Well,
got
and I think that goes back to what Marcus said, which is build pride within a community. Because again, it's now people are proud about having kids and this and that and
right,
stuff like that. I was talking to a young lady friend just this past few days, and it's crazy how certain people's mentality is, and
right,
she's sitting there talking about her relationship, and she's like, I just found out I'm pregnant, and the messed up part is that he and I aren't on good terms, and things aren't going great. And I'm like, well, what the hell was y'all doing having unprotected sex with a dude who, you're sitting here talking, who you're iffy about? You're iffy about this guy. And then I said, well, have you two ever thought about counseling together? She's like, no. I'm like, so you mean to tell me that you're not only are you iffy, but now you're not even willing to put in the work? You know what I mean?
Well,
and that's the other part of it. Now, Uncle Mishorn, or whoever this guy is, Mishorn Daniels here, it says, state pride, truth, and factual. We were born in America as us. We were American slaves, WWAS, since Jamestown, Virginia, 1619 to 1876. Marcus, I'm going to let you decipher that.
Well, I think, not in relation to that particular comment, but I think what we have to do is to say that in this particular instance, the American slave culture was birthed right here in America. And I think what he's saying is that we took the people that came from Africa. They were disconnected from Africa. The family, which we're talking about today, was destroyed. And the way to do that was to remove the protector and systematically remove the protector from the family. 69, 68, 68. And so what they did, 68, yeah. Give me just a second. Hold on.
So Marcus, when you look at that, then go ahead, Marcus. I'm sorry.
So I'm sorry, I got distracted by. I'm at the Kentucky Association of Morticians conference today, and I just arrived, so I'm still in the middle of trying to register. But what I was saying is that there's no doubt that the American slave culture was the first culture born in this country. All the others came from other places, and those are imported cultures. And so what Mishorn is talking about is that this culture was birthed right here in America, and systematically to maintain that culture over the past 400 years, they've had to decimate the family, meaning to remove the father figure from the family in order to maintain that control. I believe that's where he was going with that. Now, gotcha. What I say is that we have to take that and make it our own. We attempt to make other things our own. I hear people say nigger with an A and this and that to try and soften the blow and make it something else. But when you talk about being called a slave, you get 9 kinds of hell and resistance about that, and why that would be important that we claim that as our own and the heritage that comes with that. And I think that's where we talk about starting to initiate the pride in our community, because at that point, we're saying this country doesn't exist without the labor and everything that we had to make it what it is. And so I think that's what he was talking about. But as I try to decode what he had written there.
Absolutely. And Peter, I don't know if you have a different take on that. When it comes to that, this comment or what have you. But I mean, the idea of strong men, fathers, and families building pride within a community coming first. What would be a second thing that we could say with respect to a number 2? If we had a 6, a list of 6 things, what would be a number 2?
I would say abstinence education in schools and churches, and then also marriage.
Is that like a 2, 3, and 4? Abstinence, education, and what'd you say? Parenting?
I would say number 2 is abstinence education. Number 3 would be marriage, male-female marriage relationship, and another point would be parenting education. And I've been involved with this nationally, with a couple of programs around the country, and it's kind of interesting because at one point we were spending $500 million, $500 million on sex education, which really the statistics show that the more sex education you give kids, the more sexual activity happens, which is very interesting. The opposite.
Which is weird, because I remember when I was a kid and I went through sex ed, school, I was just like, you know what? That looks like an alien. I think I'm gonna stay away from that for a while. You know, I mean, that's what I thought growing up. And so, you know, my first activity wasn't until I was about 17. Kind of my
Well,
first,
but
you
I
know.
think also too, in saying that, we also have to acknowledge that sex sells, and the propaganda that we see
Mm,
every day is what's caused a shift in society and the norms. And so we can't just say that we have to get back to that as if we ever just walked away from it. You can turn on the TV, the radio, or anything else, and the propaganda that we see every day is what's led to that shift. And so that comment probably should be directed to those major corporations and those other things that have caused that societal shift. Now we buy it, so they keep producing it. And so if we didn't buy it, they wouldn't. So some of it does rest with the individual. But when you're bombarded with that stuff every day, right, then the societal norms will shift. And that's what we're seeing,
Yeah.
right? Because
yeah.
you
Yeah.
may not remember,
Conditioning.
Joe, but you couldn't, some of the things you see on TV today would get a show canceled when I
Oh,
was growing up.
absolutely. I mean, I've been able to witness, you know, year after year as the FCC allows more cuss words on TV. I mean, I think the first time I heard the B word, the female dog word, was a kid in a TV show some years back, and I was like, "Are you serious?" And then I went and looked it up, and yep, it's allowed. So I was like,
Right.
"Wow." It's crazy. Now, here's something interesting when you look at this. I've heard it said before that one of the issues could be the fact that, well, I've heard that England, the UK, has lower sex crimes rates than the US, right? Yet, sex or nudity is shown way more in advertising and from TV to print to billboards uh, versus here. And someone might say that it's because of the fact that we hide it and don't make it so pop. So then people are so wanting to look under the skirt. You know what I mean? They're wanting to look under the dress, and they're so curious about what's under the dress, which leads them into us as a country having more sex crimes and things of that nature. What do you guys think about that?
Well, but I would also say this, and it comes down to reporting, right? And so, statistically speaking, from a FBI and police standpoint, if that is the crime that they're wanting reported, then those are the things they pick out of all the crimes that are being committed. So if for some reason that's an important issue, then all of a sudden there's a spike in that, so you get funding for it. When really the levels haven't been any higher, it's just how it's being reported, so that they create whatever buzz that needs to be around that to create whatever funding they're trying to get out of it. So I don't believe that there's a higher number. I believe it's a if you seek that out of the reporting, then it becomes higher. I think the numbers are always the same. It's just how it's reported on if the police departments and agencies are being told we want to capture that information so we can report it out, then you see a higher spike in it. But the numbers haven't really increased. It's just gotten some attention.
Hmm. Interesting. Um, I'm sitting here looking at sexual offenses recorded by police rose to a record 183,587 in the year ending December 2021, exceeding pre-pandemic levels. And this, I believe, is recorded sex crimes in England and Wales.
And so the
Um,
other thing that you get with that, Joe, is that as the definition of what that is expands, so too will the number of those go up, right? And so some of those things that weren't
mm,
sex crimes before, now we're being told to report them as sex crimes. And so you could see a very large spike in that crime because
yeah,
all of a sudden we're saying this is when it wasn't before.
yeah. When somebody took a hot dog and sexually assaulted somebody, may not have been a crime before,
Absolutely.
whereas now it might be. So I definitely get that. Absolutely. But, I mean, as we look at this, then do you guys think there's a way back? I mean, I kind of feel in this day and age that I should just probably just focus on me, my family, and just building what I need to build within my own versus trying to focus on I mean I don't know. I just feel like we're not getting anywhere with this. Is there no hope? I mean, how can we fight against this big machine here? And that's what this has become. It's a big machine that focuses on from every angle, focuses on diminishing values. So
Yeah.
how do we fight against the machine?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the very least we can get our own house in order and do our best to have a successful, loving family, marriage and family, and hopefully that would be able to, spread a little bit to our neighbors and be a good neighbor. But every person has their own individual responsibility. So, it'd be nice if we could just snap our fingers and get other people to act the way we want them to. If
But then that in a sense goes back to building pride. So I mean, I'm excited that we
well,
put
I don't
building
know about
pride
that. I
within a
mean,
community
I
as
don't
number
know.
one.
I don't know. I don't know that
Well,
that's
I
a
mean, if
huge
if if
factor.
if you're doing what you're doing, your house, your curb appeal to your house looks great, right? Well, if someone has pride for their neighborhood, for their fellow man, for their home in general, if they look at your home and your home is looking extra spiffy, and their home is looking quite shabby, well, maybe they'll go ahead and start doing something. And I've seen this in my parents' neighborhood in Miramar, Florida. I've seen where there was a time where the young kids just kind of ravished the neighborhood, right? Tore it up. And then as those kids got older and moved out, then the older parents and stuff able to start doing some things. I guess they got some more money in their pockets now. And I can see where the neighborhood from one house to another just started getting nicer and nicer, and then everybody's fixing it up, and then I'm out there laying sod with my parents' house, and they putting in new driveways and everything, and all I see in the driveway now is a Lexus, a Porsche, and a Mercedes. Uh, so when I look at that, then I see, to me that's pride,
Yeah,
right? So if you're making do with your home and making your home look nice, then the next person does it, and then the next person does it. Next, that's all pride. People are taking pride in their community.
yeah, that makes
So that's
sense.
why I yeah, I think going back to pride, I think that's our major point. So how do we build pride? Right now I got building pride number one, observing abstinence, until married, number two. Number three, increasing your education. We spend the most on education here in America, yet we're at the bottom of the list among every other organized country around the world when it comes to education, especially in math and science, right?
Well,
Um,
and here's one thing I would say abolish public education would be very valuable too, because the cultural Marxism that has been pushed in the last 100 years is all coming from the academia and public education. And one of the main goals of cultural Marxism is to destroy the patriarchal system, family, male dominated. So this is not by accident that all of this is happening. And, they dominate academia like 95-1, so 95-5. So, if we were to do away with public education and let families choose their own, not do away with, but we hear about the defund the police. I started a discussion to fund public education in America and let families and guardians decide if they want to send their kid
Well,
to
we
public
tried that already. We tried that already, Peter, and there was no distribution of resources that made that possible. So we've already tried that to let education go its own way. And what we found is that everybody looks like you got all the resources, and everybody who was like me got whatever they felt like giving us when it was left over.
When did we try that? I mean,
oh, you mean when did we try education and let people do as they please?
No, I'm
well, if it
talking
weren't
about empowering parents to decide what kind of education, if they want some moral education along with science and technology.
They did that when they created parochial schools, right? So that you didn't have to go to school with me, and then you could get those things over there. They let parents decide that. When Brown versus Board of Education came out, many parents decided that. You see, and they slow walked the system so that we didn't get any of those things then. And so what you're talking about now is taking public education away and the money that goes with those and wherever the parents decide to send them.
Okay. Let me clarify. School choice and vouchers means parents get the money and they decide, not the cultural Marxists that run our public education.
Well, I disagree that cultural Marxists run our public education. You see, that's something you subscribe to. I'm a product of public education.
I don't think he's saying that cultural Marxism runs it, but as far as the people or what have you, I think he's saying there's an ideology that has been subscribed to that is applicable to cultural Marxism in duplication of cultural Marxism. Because I'm trying to find this post. If I find it, I'll play it for you guys. But it was where someone was talking about how they came from or they went and studied like in Germany or somewhere as it pertains to education. And the whole idea was to dumb the people down and get them in the ideology of just following whatever the status quo is, as opposed to being real thinkers. And that is actually the real plight to public education.
Now, I agree with that in part, right? Because we don't teach critical thinking anymore. We don't teach to ask why and to follow on and to understand. I agree that they expect us to take a certain amount of things just as they are and not to question them. Absolutely. Right. But to say that it's Marxist or culturally Marxist, I don't agree with that.
Well,
where does Marxism come from? Is that a German thing?
Well, no. Well, Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx was a German. Friedrich Engels was an English person. But when we talk about the new neo-Marxism, became very popular in the 1960s with French Marxist intellectuals, and it spread to Yale University, and now it pretty much dominates all of Western education, not just America, England, Australia, and the vast majority of academics adhere to neo-Marxism, and and one of their tenets is to destroy the nuclear family of males. They see the biggest problem is patriarchal societies run by males. So one of the goals is to dismantle that, and they're pretty open about it. So this is this is pretty well known. All the recent studies. There was an interesting gentleman who was he was a liberal from Santa Cruz University. He was saying 50 years ago, when you looked at academia, it was about 3-2 center left or center right professors. Right now, it's 48-1. So you got 48, progressive academics to one conservative, and that's
so. What does the air quote? What do the air quotes mean? I think that's what that was. What does that mean?
Well, I'm just saying it's now 48-1 in academia that are left-wing cultural Marxists versus conservatives. So
So what would a right wing cultural Marxist look like?
Well, no, I'm talking about center right. I'm not talking about right wing. I'm talking about.
But you said left wing, so I'm asking you, what does a right wing look like?
Well, I would say a conservative. Someone.
Well,
who
but then then you
It's
say
not
conservative. Well, no, but there's a difference. So you say conservative when you talk about the right wing.
All right. Well, hold on. Let me backtrack. His exact thing was center left or center right. So it was 3-2 center left, because academia has always been more liberal than conservative. That's just the way it is. Now it's 48-1, so it's very unbalanced, and that's not
Okay,
helpful.
so
His point was, even though he was a center left gentleman, was that that's very unhealthy for any society, that you have such an unequal balance. And that's why we're seeing so much of this transgender stuff, the LGBTQ, because that's, they're pushing that big time. But also the dismantling of the family is part of the strategy of cultural Marxism, because if you have weak families, socialism is be more apropos. Here's
and
another.
then that goes back to the idea that even Hinckley, he's Ed Hinckley, he's big on that, saying that it's communists infiltrating America. And look, let's just be real. They said they were going to do it, right? They said they were going to infiltrate America and tear America up from the inside out, and it looks like it's happening. Now look at this comment here. We say versus public education, I propose public funding but private use. The conservatives are mostly teaching science or tech related classes. All right. Now, again, he said conservatives. He didn't say the Republicans. He said conservatives. And again, I think that's where we need to focus on more so when we're talking politics or policies or what have you, is conservative versus liberal viewpoints, as opposed to just sitting there saying Republican or Democrat, because no Republican is fully conservative, and no Democrat is fully liberal. It's impossible. You can't be a human and that be possible. You would have to have some type of devilish demonic spirit to just be all liberal or just be all conservative. Like, it doesn't make sense to be just one. Yeah, you have to be a little bit of both.
It's situational dependent. And I think people slide up and down the scale depending on whatever suits their needs at the time. I absolutely agree with that.
Absolutely. Which is what people should do,
Absolutely.
and people need to stop trying to say I'm a Republican. No, you're not. So why don't you walk up to that young lady and grab her crotch? You know what I mean? You can't just say that, because that's what a Republican leader did. And so do you agree with that? Well, no, I don't agree with that. Okay, so just don't sit there and just say that you're Republican, because that would encompass everything that comes along with it. Any ill-gotten sexual activity from any leaders or anything like that, it would all encompass that. You say you're all liberal, then it would all encompass that. And I know I'm reaching when I'm talking about grabbing personal idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. But
let's be clear, Joe. You can say if you're a registered Republican, you're a Republican. If you're a registered Democrat, you're a Democrat. If you're registered independent, you're independent. That's different than ideological, conservative, liberal, progressive, Yeah, so those are two different things. I mean, if someone says they're a Republican, they're a registered Republican, that's indisputable. That doesn't mean they agree with.
I mean, I know, but again, to me, that does. I mean, okay, what I'm saying is we have to do away with this terminology of saying Republican and Democrat, because that would mean that you're all encompassing everything that comes along with it.
No, it just means you register. I mean, the political system, when you go to register,
we're talking semantics when we do that. We're kind of
we are.
I mean,
well,
that's. But look at this here. I want to let you guys know something, because this education topic was really good. I want you guys to see this video and tell me what you think, because I think it's pretty awesome. And this is what I was looking for. So we'll look at this, and we'll talk about it afterwards. It's all about the education system and such like that. All right.
Did you know that the American education system was modeled after the German education system, which was literally designed to destroy the concept of free will in its citizens' minds? That's not even my opinion. That is literally what the person who spearheaded the German education system said. Towards the end of the 1700s, present day Germany had invented the Prussian method of education, which was introduced by a man named Johann Fichte, who said, and I quote, education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as the schoolmasters would have wished. Germans became interested in destroying free will after they were defeated in battle in 1806. The Prussian emperor was concerned about the terrible defeat done by Napoleon in 1806. His concern was not that Prussian forces had been defeated, but that Prussian soldiers had acted as individuals and not as a unit. The new education system would create the unit that he had in mind. Now, see, the primary goals of this system were not intellectual training, but rather conditioning the students for obedience, subordination, and collective life. They lost this battle against Napoleon. They created this education system. And years later, they got their revenge against Napoleon and beat them in battle. Soon after that, countries from all over the world became interested in the Prussian method of education. American politician Horace Mann, best known as the father of American education, literally traveled to Europe to study the Prussian model of public education. He was seeking a way to change unruly children into disciplined citizens. That system that he brought back from Germany still exists today. What do you think? Does it seem like our education system is designed to turn us into obedient citizens? I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, we sat in rows and columns and had assigned seats. Some of us wore uniforms. We had to say the Pledge of Allegiance. We're all tested on the same subjects, despite having different interests. From a very young age, we are introduced to and forced to become okay with this concept of authority, which is the power to enforce obedience. Now, clearly, there are pros to having a public education system, but I do think that we should ask ourselves, is this education or is it indoctrination? Cool, we're being taught, but what are we being taught and why? What is this teaching optimizing us to be? To everyone who got bad grades or often found themselves in detention, maybe it wasn't that you were unable to learn, maybe you were just unable to be controlled. The only thing that I regret is not learning about this while I was still in school, because I would have loved to walk up to one of my teachers, look them in the eye, and ask them.
So good stuff there.
Yeah.
Now, what do you guys think about that? I mean, and here's Ambrose Lee says kindergarten is a German name, and that's absolutely truth. I sat here and looked it up myself just now. The word kindergarten comes from the German language. Kinder means children, and Garten means garden. The term dates back to the 19th century when Frederick Froebel started the first kindergarten, garden of children, in 1840. So that, again, what do you do in a garden? You grow stuff, right? You nurture it, you create fertile ground, and you plant stuff and you grow it, right? So children, garden, it's the idea of implanting things in them from young, in whatever it is that the society that you're in wants them to know, right? Which in this case, our society is run by a government public school system coming down that pipeline, right? So what do you guys think?
Well, I think we all have a certain amount of indoctrination as part of anything that happens. I also agree that we're all very creative until we enter the school system, right? I don't doubt that kills creativity. And if you look at artists, they generally survive that creation killing piece. I think if you look at children, they're all very creative until they enter public schools, and then that creativity is put in a box, and then you think inside those boxes. So absolutely agree that happens. But what I think is different and I don't know about other school systems because I've only ever been in school in America, but while they practice and encourage indoctrination, they also practice the free will to think and go beyond what's being taught, to ask the questions. Prior to us eliminating critical thinking from the curriculum, we did that. And so I think some of that is accurate, but I think we also talked critical thinking and talked about asking why and stuff like that. And in recent years, that's gone away. And I think that's part of where we see how we are today, is that we don't ask our children to critically think about things when it's put in front of them. They just accept it for its face value and move on out.
Yeah. You know what? Prime example, I had a conversation with my kids the other day, and we were listening to NPR and such like that. And it was funny because we were listening. It was two points here. We were listening to NPR, and we were talking about the statues. I asked them a question. I said, "Hey, what do you think about removing statues? You know, quote unquote racist statues and things of that nature around the world?" And they said, "Yeah, I think it's a good idea to get rid of that stuff." You know, now these are 15-year-olds, right? Um, with that in mind, I brought the point. I said, "Well, here's the thought. What if you get rid of it, and then there comes a generation that doesn't know about that history? There's a 50-50 chance that they could potentially repeat that because they don't know about it. There's no books about it. They're not talking about it. And they're getting rid, if they're getting rid of the statues about it, then they would get rid of the books about it. They would get rid of the microfiche about it. They would get rid of all that stuff about it. They're like, oh no, well, they're not going to get rid of books. And then right there on NPR, they were talking about an article where in prison, they're getting rid of some books in some prison there.
Well, I think that makes some sense when you say they might be forgotten about. But if you look at the books that contain how that period was happened anyway, it's not suggestive of what really happened. And so the whitewashing of it, or the cultural counseling of it, I guess is what they're calling it now. They counseled it a long time ago. You see, the lost cause was all about trying to make those folks who were treasonous seem like they were not the bad person in the deal. So the lost cause was only about that. So they started it the day the war was over. They started erasing that. Now, when we talk about the statues coming back and where they came from, and I have been threatened by folks when I talk about General Lee. But when General Lee, as he was ending the war, he had said, we need to put these things away if we're ever going to reconcile this country. And they did that until the civil rights movement started. Then they brought those same symbols of hate and oppression back out to remind us that we'll always be second-class citizens. So I don't know that eliminating them, and they don't bother me one way or the other, whether they're eliminated or not. But the point of being made that we must have something that remembers, that's why they should be in museums and places where you go to learn those things. I shouldn't have to walk down to my county courthouse where I pay my taxes and stand under the statue of someone who was designed to keep me in slavery. And so
now I actually agree with that. I think that's a good point. Don't remove them altogether or tear them down and go put them in a museum somewhere. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. We should start a movement called the Statue Removal Museum movement.
Well, and I will tell you, I traveled to Danville, Virginia this past week, which I learned something that I did not know, but the Confederacy moved their capital from Richmond to Danville. And that was the last home of the Confederacy. Had I not gone to that museum there in Danville, and I would not have learned that about the Confederacy, because they don't teach it, or at least I didn't see it taught. And so I think there are places where you can find that information and learn something that doesn't make it offensive. I went through that entire museum, and they had several things relating to the Confederacy and the Old South. And so I found that to be a very appropriate place to learn those things. And I felt, I would recommend to anybody to go visit that if you get the opportunity.
No, absolutely. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, so Danville is just an hour away, and my family has a church in Danville as well as Richmond. But Peter, what were you going to say as we begin to close out? But what did you have on your mind?
Well, getting back to fatherhood, I know how we got into these subjects.
True.
This is all interesting stuff, but yeah,
All these segues.
strong. And we don't talk enough about marriage because marriage is the foundation of family, really. So it's interesting. I was probably 25 years ago in Louisville. I was teaching some young people, and I mentioned marriage, and one girl raised her hand very sincerely, say, "Well, what is marriage?" And she had never seen it in
Wow.
4 or 5 generations, and it was very, I mean, it was eye opening. You know, she had never seen a married couple, her mom, grandma, great grandma, so
Wow.
mostly single parent, and so a lot of the real serious not all of it, but some very, very serious dysfunction among all cultures is 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of fatherlessness, no marriage, and also come most of them, no one's been to college, so it's kind of a vicious cycle when you don't have strong marriage and family encouraging the kids to succeed. It's you can have a great marriage and great family and the kids go off. So it's not, 100%, but generally, if you have a good, loving father and mother that, first of all, love each other and have a good relationship, and they pass on that love and respect to their children. If you have a bad marriage or not married and they're fighting all the time, well, that's not a good example, too. But there's certain principles of marriage that should be taught, and there's marriage curriculum that I've been involved around the country. The problem is it's very hard to get funding for that, along with abstinence. I was given an example that Planned Parenthood was getting $500 million a year, still are, for comprehensive sex education, and finally we got $5 million for abstinence. So 5 million to 500 million, and then we propose 50 million for abstinence, which is proved if you teach abstinence, you reduce sexual activity and teen pregnancy. Anyway, well, they cut the 50 million out, then they cut the 5 million out. So right now there's zero money for abstinence education, which is scientifically proven to work, and there's close to $1 billion of what they call comprehensive sex education, which is they teach kid all use this condom, this birth control, blah blah blah, and they also are pushing the LGBTQ agenda through that federal funding. So that's something could be addressed. Hey, if you're a parent and you want your kid to have comprehensive sex education, that's great. But if you also want your kid to have abstinence and education, you should have that ability. And that's why school choice and the voucher system is so important, because it brings competition. If someone loves their public schools, my kids went through public schools, you know, um, fine. But parents and guardians should have that choice. And with low income and middle income families, they can't pay the additional fee for private education. So I
So
know that.
with school choice, Peter, this is the thing that I have trouble with. That I get to have school choice, but if that school doesn't have an athletic program, then I get to go to the public school and participate in the athletic program. And so
That's different. You're talking about homeschooling.
No, I'm talking about school choice, right? If you read on through the rest of the bill, I'm allowed to go and have my school choice. But if the school doesn't have an athletic program, then I get to go back to a public school and participate in athletics. And
Well,
so,
are you talking about in Kentucky? Because
yeah, I'm talking about in Kentucky.
Oh, okay, that's different. Yeah.
Well, but the point being is that it's okay. You wanted to get educated, then that private school then also ought to offer some type of athletic program for you. You shouldn't be able to take the money and go to a private school, but because you want a better education, and then go play sports at the public school because your private school doesn't offer one.
Well, what'll happen is right now, because so much money is put into public education and it's double, you have to pay. You pay taxes to pay for the public education. And if you want to send your kid to a parochial or Christian school or even a Montessori, you have to pay for that. If there was vouchers, you would see these private schools, which would be, grow and have their own sports leagues. I think the competition would make the public schools much, much better as well. So it's just a win-win. Um, without competition, as you know, quality goes down.
Well, but also with that, Peter, is that if I choose because you are not a disciplined student that I don't want you in my school, then you get back in the public school system. And so naturally those schools are going to do better because I get to choose the students that I want to have.
Well, and that comes down to the family.
But it doesn't come down to the family. It comes down to that person at the school saying, this person makes good grades. They'll make my numbers look good. I don't want you, Marcus, because you don't want to comply with what's going on here, and we'll send you back to the public system. And so when you talk about numbers and what those schools do, you also have to look at the backside of it and say, you know what? They do better because they get to selectively decide who their students are going to be. So when you talk about competition, there's no real competition because I don't have to take you if I don't want you. And then it's up to the public to educate you.
Yeah, well then, yeah, my kids went to traditional schools and there's a huge waiting list in Jefferson County because they have a little bit higher standards. And even though it's a public school, they also, they sit down with the parents and say, listen, you got to be involved in your kid's education. If you're not, then your kid can't go there. So they create higher standards. And that's why the traditional schools in Jefferson County do very, very well. The top two schools in Jefferson County high schools are Male and Manual, and they're traditional schools. And I think it's good because it holds the parents accountable. You're not going to just drop your kid off and us babysit. No, you got to be involved in their education because the number one degree success rate is parental involvement in their kids' education. That's more important than what school they go to, what teachers they have. The number one indicator of success is parental involvement in education. So that's why it's very important that the parents are the first teachers, not the school.
Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But just as you move into these other areas, though, you say that that's not really true. I should be able to pick where I want them to go. If that holds true across the board, and I have been involved with different programs and studies trying to figure out why that happens like that. And some of it is that the parents that aren't involved are out trying to make a living for their children when they can't be at the schools. And so the schools and the school system needs to make allowance that fits that parent schedule, not just between 9 and 3 when the school is open.
Yeah, no. And that video was showing, the school system is kind of monolithic, one size fit all, and that doesn't work. So I think as innovation and technology, there's a lot more opportunity. I mean, homeschoolers do far better than anyone else in America, and scholastically, and
no, I have to agree.
Again, and that makes our second point.
I wouldn't mind giving homeschooling parents that voucher.
I could see that. Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, at some point, doesn't homeschool eventually turn into like a public school? Because next thing you know, you got 50 kids in there in somebody's homeschool, and they're overrun. They need more help, and here's a comment here from Ambrose Lee. He says Marcus is sharing about choosing students, and in Minnesota that has happened, and sadly, many who started private schools were thieves and scammers, and several in Minnesota took a lot of money, and the school went under from disappeared monies. That old sleight of hand trick there.
That's a cultural problem. We've become so self-centered and independent and selfish and greedy. Who can you trust these days? We can't trust our politicians, our preachers, our teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
Now we'll say this about
it seems like the world just needs to be blown up and start over again, right?
But in Peter's defense, I will say this about homeschooling. My two oldest granddaughters are homeschooled, and by the time they reached middle school, they were leaps and bounds ahead of the other students in their grade. And their mother did a great job homeschooling them. But she had the curriculum from the school system, and she taught it the way that was good for her children. But when my oldest granddaughter entered the 8th grade, she was far ahead of those other 8th graders. And so I think homeschooling, if possible, you can't beat it any kind of way.
Maybe there needs to be a mix of homeschool along with public school, right? But then even when it comes to public school, a lot of teachers are capped with what they can and can't do. They have to do it, and they can do it in different ways, but they have to do it in alignment with this particular curriculum that comes from somewhere else. Now, we all know that people learn differently. And I would say that absolutely, when you come to a melanated community, there's a different way that they're going to learn and a different way that they need to be taught, simply because of in this day and age, the years of oppression and I mean, we don't even realize certain things. People don't put science in this when they start talking about this. Up until age 7, a child's mind is in what's a state called a theta state. So they're literally just absorbing information. When it comes up to, a child's brain, a human brain is not even fully developed until age 21. So why the hell are we letting kids choose their own gender? It's ridiculous. And then go as far as letting them do surgery, absolutely ridiculous. But either way, folks, listen, we can talk about this and talk about this. And again, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. Uncle Mishorn says homeschooling is what's best, placing the parents in control, not the government. I think that's good because the burden needs to be placed on the parent more so. What happened nowadays is people are too lax when it comes to that. But
Joe,
so here we're going.
Here's the international among Western industrialized nation, not just Western, but industrialized nation. America pays more per capita student in the world, and we're like 47th in the country, in the world. Ranking.
Yeah, we're at the bottom of the list among every other organized country around the world. Absolutely.
So we're not getting a good ROI, but the teachers union.
But that begs the question.
Union in America.
Maybe we are getting a good ROI because the government gets what they pay for.
Yeah.
And this is what they're paying for. They're paying for kids to be dumb in America so that they have the greater ability to control. Right. So again, you know what, folks, again, we'll continue this conversation. This has been a wonderful, amazing episode of the Truth Be Told Show. Once again, we'll close out with some commercials and good stuff. I want you guys to make sure you check out these commercials so that you can patronize our sponsors here. But again, Better Days with Peter Hayes, Marcus, he had to jump out. He's at a conference. And, again, folks, it has been a great, great show. We'll see you again next week, same place, same time, right here on the Truth Be Told Show. Peace, Peter. See you, brother.
Hey folks, check out healthdaddywow.net. 100% plant-based herbs and supplements. Whether you're in person or online, use the word tipping for 10% off. Remember, feel better, look great, healthdaddywow.net. Remember, healthdaddywow.net.
Habibi Trading Company, home of soap, sticks, and Saya Baba products. Over 400 locations at a store near you. Cincinnati, Ohio, Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, Southern Indiana, or find yours online at sayababa.com. Again, that's sayababa.com. Habibi Trading Company, where you can find fragrances to incite your senses.
Thank you, Truth Be Told, for allowing God's Lives Matter to be a sponsor. Wearable Products, as the purple t-shirt, is bearing witness every life created by God has infinite value. Visit God'sLivesMatter.com.
I don't need to sit at your table. We building one. We in the process of building a table. We building a table. I don't gotta sit at your table. I'm building my own table, and I will build you a table in the presence of your enemies.
All right, cue the music.
Cueing music.
Start the music.
Starting music.
And go.
It's the Truth Be Told show, where we place America first. Honoring those who America has forgotten. Listen in and unlearn to relearn. As we set the record straight. And now, your host of the Truth Be Told show, Mr. Just Ask Joe and Uncle Nishorn.